Hello and welcome to The Person of the Therapist, our series that really focuses on how therapists came to be who they are, what kind of values and wisdoms they've gained in their practice. And today, I'm delighted to introduce Hana Perkey, who is working in Georgia with her special population. And Hana, I'm so delighted to have an opportunity to speak with you and for you to share with us the wisdoms with the populations very different that you have been and are working with. And then we'll go through some of my questions. So how would you anchor um, sharing with everybody what is your field? What is your specialization, your special interest?
Sure. I do want to say I want to also express my appreciation for having this opportunity to speak with you. I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm licensed in the state of Georgia and South Carolina. I am, I would, I would kind of talk about myself as a trauma specialist. I began working in a private practice, but then I moved toward working with domestic violence victims. And I worked with a nonprofit organization. I ran the counseling program for them for a domestic violence center for about 7 years. And so now I'm kind of back transitioning into private practice, but the trauma is sort of following me. It's because I have made it kind of the central interest of my career. And that it's something that I find immensely challenging, but also very gratifying. And at this point, I don't really see myself stepping away from that.
Now, if I understand, uh, part of your coming full circle is to now be in touch with teaching students, those that are really hungry to learn, who are just naive to the field. And we're going to get to some of your wisdoms and takeaways from your clients. How would you frame the students who are coming to you and the kind and maybe just a nutshell of their hungers, the questions,
Mhm.
what they, why they're even coming to this field
Mhm.
at the very earliest stage. Let's start right there.
So I started supervising interns when I was working for the nonprofit organization, and then I moved towards becoming a certified clinical supervisor and supervising beginning clinicians. And now I sort of parlay. I continue to supervise clinicians, but I also teach graduate students at a local university when they are engaging with their first field experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I have kind of grown to appreciate over the years of working with students is just the degree of anxiety that comes with stepping into the field and starting to work with people,
Mm-hmm.
and just appreciating how, truly kind of brave it is and how much support is needed for them to succeed and learn the skills to feel kind of somewhat confident that is something that they can do on their own. Because I think that you forget when you practice for a few years just how green you were at some point. And so, I've really come to kind of try to be there for them as the necessary support rather than sort of be frustrated, when they are telling me like they don't feel prepared. So
Mm.
that's been a journey for me. And so I really feel like I need to be the cheerleader, and I need to be the encourager, and I need to be the person, like, if you don't know, you can come to me, and here are some
Wow.
resources.
Beautiful. But you take a very Rogerian, would you say, humanistic, um, encouraging approach with your guidance, mentoring, and then supervision.
Yes, I think it was like working side by side students, really let me see and understand, like, what are the gaps? Because there's the thing that you learn in the classroom, and maybe, a lot of students, especially at the master's level, might not always necessarily have lots of opportunities to like practice what they're learning until they're thrown into their field experience. And then they're sort of expected to be almost like a baby, clinician, like a fully formed clinician.
Yeah.
And so working side by side students, I really kind of saw like, they need someone there. They really need someone to walk with them and kind of show them things, honestly, because it's not easy to figure some of these interventions out. And, you feel a lot of fear of messing up and, doing something that's harmful. And I can stand there with my experience and say like, no, it's going to be okay. You're not going to harm anybody trying to implement this intervention. But I also can see that, that just because I'm saying that, that doesn't mean that they're going to feel that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So reflecting on the newness, the vulnerabilities of these young, hopeful clinicians, their fears and hopes, brings me to where did you come from in terms of what in your life path do you think, what were moments or touchstones in your life path that led you to the field of mental health? So I'd really like to hear how that journey came about for you.
So I think I'm probably not so different from lots of other clinicians and psychologists and therapists that end up in the helping profession, social workers. I think in my family, I had people that I struggled to understand because, they didn't seem to be making sense to me. And so some of their behaviors and the way that they approached me felt harmful to me. And I think I was kind of driven partially by that, just like wanting to figure things out, wanting to understand human beings on a different level, understanding what impacts behavior, just to make sense of some of my experiences.
Mhm.
And I think um, I can be very analytical. So I don't know, there was just a lot of different things that were really attractive to me early on, coming into the profession. And I actually started at a university in the Czech Republic, which is my home country. And I was there for a couple of years, but I think that's when I sort of became disillusioned a little bit because at the time that I was studying there, we had to take, as a psychology student, I had to take all pre-med classes. And then the psychology classes that I was taking were very much kind of wound oriented. So it was like the Leipzig sort of laboratory, we're going to measure behaviors.
Yeah.
And it just didn't, not that all of the classes were that way, but I did kind of become disillusioned with it. So when I immigrated into the United States, I actually went back to get an art degree. And while I was doing my art classes, I was also going about trying to get all my transfer credits for my psychology classes. And I just happened to meet a person who became my mentor for the next, I think, 12 years. And it's hilarious because I'm actually working with her again at the university. Who basically just told me like, don't be crazy, you have all these credits, you should just finish psychology as a major as well. And she really was instrumental in kind of putting me back on the path towards being a clinician. So I think that, that sort of is really representative of my journey. Like there were just opportunities that I came upon that I just took advantage of, because they were exciting to me, even though they weren't necessarily in line with my thinking at the time. And they were also people that I was drawn to that became excellent mentors that I really learned so much from, got so much support from. And again, sort of, they helped me kind of eke out a path as I was going rather than plan ahead in some ways. And so that was kind of my journey to, like through finishing my undergrad degree here in the States, then doing graduate program. And even my kind of transition to being focused more on trauma came about because a dear friend said, hey, this domestic violence center is like opening a new facility and they're going to start a counseling program. They really need somebody that can do that for them. You should go and check it out. And I went and I talked to the director, and she's another one of my mentors. And it was just a fabulous conversation, and it was felt really exciting to me, even though I never, up until that point, I only dealt with trauma working with my individual child and adolescent clients. So as I was talking to her, didn't feel very confident that I really had the skills that I needed then to, make happen what she wanted me to make happen. But it just felt so exciting and so like such a wonderful challenge. And so that's kind of what led to my transition to that field. So that's something that I always share with students. It's like, you don't know exactly where the path is going to take you. And when you feel that kind of passion or excitement about an opportunity or about a person that you're talking to, that's what you want to follow.
As you share part of your story, I'm hearing the underlying threads of tenacity and of insights that are rare from a cross-cultural perspective, from really being absorbed in the truth of the Czech Republic and your lived experience with your unique family, and then transitioning the power of positive, helpful mentors that really lifted you up and supported you and guided you, and then your skill as an artist, your deep compassion, the insights from working with children, and then transitioning that in the trauma work to the inner child of the wounded inner child of adults. These are the threads that I'm hearing flowing through just a wonderful foundation, not to mention the medical model that, while didn't seem useful at the time, now is very, very useful. What do you value, Hana? What are, if you had core values that you would really anchor, that ground your clinical work, your clinical perspective, what are they?
Humility, for sure. I think that's one of the most important aspects. I think that's one thing that I try to like help my students to find, because you have to find a place where any person that's coming to meet with you, you first of all, you have to view them as a peer and as a teacher. And then you have to be able to relate to their story in a way that allows you to really crave that intimate knowledge and attunement with them. And so I think humility is really key there.
Yeah, I hear that. I just
Mhm.
want to underscore the how you've lifted humility up, and with coupling that with a real groundedness. So it's a powerful form of humility, of truth giving, of truth finding. That's how it comes across to me.
Mm, yeah. Another big one is creativity.
Mhm.
Because I think that just comes from me being an artist, and um, me like that's something that I think that's one of my internal drives, is just being creative. So I'm always coming up with something or making something, and I think that's hugely helpful. I'm not saying that you have to be like that and have to drive yourself crazy constantly coming up with new ideas, but I think it's very helpful if you can think outside of the box and like work with the tools that you have in a different way to figure out how to address the issues that your client is dealing with. I think that's very helpful.
So you're innovative.
Mhm.
If we were to, there are a number of leaders in the field that we could certainly build that thread back in his Rollo May and Thomas Ogden, being innovative in the moment, and hearing that spark of invention. It's a courage. It's like when Rollo might says the courage to create. And when
Mhm.
Thomas Ogden says for it really requires us to be innovative in the moment, which goes to Roger's follow the lead of the client. My sense is that you really integrate your creativity as well as your openness, very open and receptive to resonate, to be fully present with your clients, to open the door to discovery and shun the recipe oriented approaches to therapy. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. Now, I do want to say that oftentimes, in order to be able to be creative and innovative, you have to kind of achieve a degree of mastery with the tools that you do have.
Yes.
And so, I don't want to completely dismiss some, like even I am EMDR certified, going through the EMDR certification
Uh-huh.
process. There is
Uh-huh.
a great degree of emphasis on protocol and having some degree of fidelity to the protocol.
Hmm.
And and as a person that does kind of, is all about creativity, that's hard for me, but I have come to appreciate after years of like getting certifications in different interventions that it is necessary. Like you have to know what the tools can do before you start playing with them.
And that goes for Gestalt, which unfortunately is too often dismissed in our university trainings and just go do an empty chair. But no, there's so much more to it, as well as hypnosis. It's as if therapeutic metaphor, EMDR, and so many. We absolutely need the boundary setting, the
Yeah.
guidelines. What is the container?
Mhm.
What are the brackets within which, and for you to bring in your creativity and willingness to be spontaneous within the safeguards, within the safe
Yes.
rails.
Yes.
What is your art form?
Well, I do lots of different things, but I think my natural inclination is towards like the 2D art. So I like to draw and paint and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
those kinds of things. But
And you do that with your clients.
I do sometimes, so it depends. So, like I said, like I just enjoy coming up with new things. And so I think that's the another thing that's very important to me is playfulness.
Uh-huh.
Because and coming from being, starting out as a children's therapist, I think what I've learned is that, especially dealing with the inner children and like the coming from the internal family system perspective,
Mhm.
there are parts of us that are kind of frustrated and starving for play. And I honestly, now that not every session can be a barrel of laughs, obviously, but I feel like when there is an element of playfulness, it certainly makes it a lot more fun for me. Even the tough sessions, even in what very challenging session, it just you feel differently if you feel like you've brought something into the session that was playful and
Mm,
not that serious. It
mhm.
allows me to relax into the flow of the session. It allows the other person, the client, to relax into the flow of the session. And and honestly, I just time and time again, I just see adults really embracing being playful, and even like the ones that look at my centre figures then kind of with a scorn and degree of suspicion. Once they start doing that, they're sort of like brag to their like spouses and their friends that this is what they get to do in therapy. So I've just always found that to be enormously effective and helpful.
Would you be willing to share right now any of the ideas of the creative intervention, something that worked particularly well? Is there an example that comes to mind that you could share with us?
Well, one of the easiest things that I love to do is when we're talking about either like a difficult pattern of behaviors that someone's dealing with, or even when we're trying to like resource the client, find something that they would consider helpful. you know, having the shelves full of figures, I can always say like, you know, well, that part of you that feels that way, would you be able to find them on those shelves? Or, you know, I had a client the other day who just has a lifetime of trauma and from childhood to the military and beyond.
Yeah.
And we were talking about his difficulty sleeping. And so we were trying to come up with some, we like did a safe place kind of guided imagery exercise. We were trying to come up
Mhm.
with some ways to kind of give him some tools that would help him relax before he goes to bed. And it was just hard for him to kind of think about trying to implement that before he's going to bed. And so I just said, well, what is it that you need to feel safe? And is it on the shelves anywhere? And he just picked out an eagle. And then now the eagle is like a protector, and it's part of just about every imagery that we do. It's, you know, it finds itself in the trays. And so like to me, like having the the shelves behind me
Yeah.
is such a huge resource and so easy to just incorporate into anything that you're doing.
I love the way you are so inventive and creative, grounded. What was you've been through narrative sand therapy trainings. What would you say immersion, the immersion of the therapist, contributes to your own insights and your own capacity in your work?
So doing the trainings the way that you do the trainings, I find so extremely, I don't even know if I have words to describe it. It's helpful, but it's also so generous in lots of different ways. I think coming to the trainings, I already had the kind of idea of like, oh, this will be great because I can, I can get really creative and playful and all those things. And I envisioned that it would be very helpful. I've heard about it. I've had some other trainings before that, but I did not really have an appreciation of the emotional power that it packs, and just the profoundness that you feel. And you don't really get to experience that unless you are experiencing it. So unless you go through that, um, which, we obviously had you as an instructor, so that was like an added bonus. It might be harder maybe with somebody else, but unless you go through that, you really, I don't think, can conceptualize just how heavy hitting that can be. And I think you need to have that understanding to really ground the practice and to put the safeguards around it.
You really integrated then in moments uh, an existential, a deepening meaningfulness for you that was transformative, not in that generic throwaway, we transform this, that, or the other thing, but that truly was a transformative moments that allowed you to open up parts of yourself, to validate parts of yourself, to empower, giving yourself more permission, maybe, to integrate what your wisdoms, your experience, and who you are. I just really hear your capacity to use your creativity and your personhood to resonate, to really be at a heightened presence to the trauma, the seriously wounded parts of the self, and how healing that is for you, being the congruence and the authenticity that immersion created for you.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was that and more. The other thing I think that was um such a gift going through that training is the realization that like you can do that type of work with anything and anywhere, because you can the it's almost like what you were teaching us was more a philosophy rather than series of techniques and interventions.
Yeah.
And so I just I just, you like your mindset shifts a little bit. So when you start doing the work from that space, when you're really resonating with the client, then anything is an opportunity to use, to project onto, to amplify, to explore. And, I started, I think I told you that like so I have a client who's an artist, and I just randomly actually kind of use a painting in that way. And I thought, oh, that would be so wonderful for him. But it's literally anything, like finding safety in the therapy room. If somebody tells you, like, I really like your furniture, well, tell me about it. Tell me what you like about that furniture. And then amplifying those attributes. And
Mhm,
it's
mm.
even you're not saying, like, oh, it's really important to you that parts of you are this way. Like, you can see how it's sort of seeping into the subconscious of the person, and they're just kind of, like their body language shifts and changes in front of your eyes. And it's wonderful.
That's very key, what you're saying right there. The respect for the client to absorb at the level they're able to in the moment, rather than explaining things to clients or somehow directing them of what something means, but keeping a very attentive eye and watching their verbal and nonverbal. Now, for our listeners who won't be familiar with narrative sand therapy, we pretty much come from the ground of an existential and social constructionist perspective. So narrative therapy, and so the bookcase, the painting on the wall, the chair that they're in, they're all symbolic. Everything is our projection, that everything has a story. So we started with the symbols as all carrying stories, not only of their own, but stories that they hold for the clients, which
Mhm.
gives us permission to have dialogues among the symbols, between the clients and the symbols. And in case consultations, I've seen you do this work. But in just moving back to, I think what comes to mind is, I think you used a painting, not not to go into the case, but I think a client actually just used a painting in your office, and you were able
Mhm.
to do a whole therapeutic process. And
Mhm.
so you really integrated the core ideas and then
Mhm.
allowed them to flow in following the lead of the client.
Now, I do want to say that that's not something that I feel like I've mastered. I kind of work on it every day. So I'm putting it out there for if you are a beginning therapist, because I think sometimes the beginning therapist will look at someone who's been practicing for a while, and it just feels like they make it look easy and they just
Yeah.
have it all figured out. But that's not the case at all.
Right.
And so, like, I do feel like a lot of the things that I've taken away from your trainings that I feel like I want to have as the core kind of values of the work that I do feel like I want to put like sticky notes and signs around my office to just remind myself. Because even what you just said, like, yes, I absolutely want the client to be completely absorbed in this kind of subconscious osmosis of what's going
Yeah.
on. But there's
Mhm.
also a part of me that gets so excited when she sees that happen, that I do want to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Don't you realize what's
Yeah.
happening?
Right. And you do see so much more, but unfortunately, sometimes it's the ego of the therapist that steps in and intervenes. And it's an egocentric position that we
Yeah.
have to send our egos out for an espresso, or tea, so
Mhm.
that we can be that so that the whole presence of the therapist is welcoming, and this creates safety. Safety is
Yeah.
such a priority. And as you speak to our young
Mhm.
therapists, or even therapists in midlife who have been using other methodologies, that this does take time. And the important thing is the therapist experience and integration of their own experience that then allows this containment for safety, rather than it's a slippery slope, isn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely.
Just to default down to training from graduate school or an internship that has very specific steps, forgetting the process of integration.
Yeah, I mean, we all have those tendencies. I want to say that too, like sometimes you feel like you see what's happening, and then when the client is not congruent with what you see, there's absolutely that kind of urge to sort of just tell the client like to align with what you need to do so that things can
Looky
go well.
here.
Yeah. And so I do feel like it's an ongoing practice, that there is
Mhm,
no like a final destination. You just have to wake up every day and
mhm,
hopefully remember that this is something that you're trying to do. And I think the biggest help there is having the courage to be self-aware in the moment, and really pay attention to what's showing up for you and how you're showing up for the client,
mhm,
so
mhm.
that you can kind of self-correct when those things, I think they're normal. I don't want to like, if that happened to you yesterday, then don't feel like you're weird or a bad clinician. I think that happens to all of us.
Exactly. It's discovery, isn't it? Like if we're truly open to a psychotherapeutic process in all its authenticity and congruence, following the lead of the client, being mindful of the therapist's mind, body, and cultural orientations, those all that nesting, embeddedness, then discovery. We
Mm.
have to be open to surprise, discovery, as well as at the same time
Mhm.
safekeeping, to be aware um, and to hold some of our awarenesses. You
Yeah.
brought symbols today
Yes.
for us to explore and
Mhm.
discover. What did you bring, and what meaning would you like to share with those?
So this little dragon,
Yes.
I think that was actually a figure that you
Mhm.
used in one of the prompted traits
Yes.
that we were doing in the training. And I just absolutely fell in love with him. So
Oh,
I
you found
immediately
it.
found him on eBay. And this guy is sort of like my creativity and playfulness rolled into one, because well, technically he could be fierce because he's a dragon, and I think he's supposed to be able to fly, so that's pretty cool. But when
Yes.
you look at his face, you can kind of see that he's very
Could you
kind.
bring him up right to the camera so we
There he is.
hello?
Can you see him?
Okay, yes.
So he's very not harmless, but he feels very kind and safe. And so I think that he's like all the good things about being creative and playful, and and courageous enough to try things even when you don't know if they're going to work.
What would you say the message, does this one have a name?
Um, so this is really weird because he's also popular with my clients. So I think I named him something, but then another client renamed him, and that kind of stuck in my head. So I've been
Oh,
calling
nice.
him Blanquito.
Blanquito.
Mm-hmm.
And
Like,
go ahead, what's that mean in
so
Spanish?
I looked it up as Spanish.
Uh-huh.
I think it could have some negative connotations, but to this client, it just kind of mean like childhood innocence.
Oh, oh, I love that. Vulnerability too, maybe.
Yes.
So the power of innocence and vulnerability in just finding woundedness and then healing that with creativity. If this one, Blanquito, had a message for us, a message for you. So let's
Mhm.
just demonstrate for everyone. If Blanquito were to turn to you and say something in silence, see if it says anything. And then I'll ask Blanquito if it would be willing to say something to us. So silence is such a big part of my trainings. And I just want to have that be a part of our exchange right now. We'll just take a few seconds and see if Blanquito has something to whisper to you without sharing it with us.
Yep, he
Got
did.
it. Okay, great. What I want our therapists to understand and to embrace is how important not knowing, to stay in the not knowing sometimes. And
Mhm.
so the sacredness of the message of whether it builds trust between the symbol, the intimacy belongs between the symbol and the client, and not between the therapist and the client, which is a different set of trust. So now, if you would mind, I would like to invite Blanquito, may I speak with you, por favor? A little Italian slips in there, I can't help it. So
Okay.
what, Blanquito, I may not be able to speak your language, but Hana understands you. Is there a message that you would like us to hear today? What message do you, Blanquito, want us to know? Hana, you'll have to do the translating.
I know. His message is that he does not like to be put on a shelf, which is sadly where he lives. he, he likes to be able to fly. So his
Oh,
message is kind of, you know, don't don't constrain yourself too much in the work that you do.
oh, oh, and to take flight,
Hmm.
take flight. So, Blanquito, I'd like to invite you to share with Hana places that you'd like to test out on the shelf, different places that you would like to cozy up with other symbols to see how that feels for you, and then to have moments when you just fly around the office onto the desk or even onto the
That's
computer.
really that. Thank you, Dr. Lee. That's really cool because I think he has a designated spot. But now that I'm thinking about it, I think I'm going to start moving him around a little bit.
See what's there. Thank you, Blanquito. Now you have another symbol that you brought.
I do, and you know this one as well.
Oh yes.
So that's also um, a symbol that I got to pick because of a training I did with Dr. D, because a fabulous person who's a therapist who was participating in the training is also a 3D artist and makes these wonderful
So that's
things.
Mama Owls. And
Mama Owls,
on
minis,
one
yeah.
side, if the camera isn't picking it up for some, that's a tree right now on one side, and on the other side is a ocean wave kind of effect, correct?
And
Yeah.
I just think it kind of perfectly encapsulates the tension that you hold when you do this work, because
Yes.
you have to be grounding and dynamic at the same time. So you have to, like those kind of opposing ideas that you have to infuse into your work, being the container for the client's story, but also being able to move with the flow of the session. Being the kind of the silent receptor, but also the force that facilitates change or helps to facilitate change. So I feel
How
like,
is this? How is this symbol then bringing it right into you, Hannah? Bringing it into all that you just said are
mhm,
your truths. Are there qualities in this piece that you most resonate with that are you?
yes, and I think that these are so universal for all of us because we're
Mhm.
all kind of hold these types of tensions. So I feel like even in my life, I am the grounding, I am the tree, I am the deeply rooted person for my children, my family, and my friends. But I'm also the force that keeps moving because life doesn't stop. Yeah. Unfortunately, you just keep changing and evolving. And fortunately, that means that you get to grow and learn. So I think both of these, that they're just part of everything that you do in life.
Now, what if the dragon, in its innocence and vulnerability and courage, were to join? What if they were to come together? What
Hmm.
what will happen in our immediacy right now between them? And questions that we often consider are, do they know each other? What is their unique experience in this moment of each other? What are you picking up right now? And this is from you can do this because you've been practicing this. You've learned this. You can stay in the immediacy. And for our audience, I'm just inviting them to think at the same time what projections would come up, what that encounter might mean for them. But for you right now, what are you hearing?
I think there's a degree of safety. I think the dragon is very much part of the system here. Like this is kind of his world. Like they are united and connected in a way. And the tree and the wave is exactly what the dragon needs to thrive, because
Mm.
he needs the force, he needs the movement, but he also needs the safety and the shelter of the tree. So I feel
So
like
keep going. Hmm.
this is kind of like what the wave and the tree is what is kind of like what provides the life force for the dragon.
Well, let's just take that in. The, the power of that life force, as you described it, the deep rootedness, the stability of the trunk, and then the flowing outward. And so the duality of flow as well as that rootedness, and then the encounter with the one who flies,
Mhm.
with the one who is vision, who has perspective because of that.
Mhm.
And the tree has a very different perspective. And so the power of the opposites. And of course, if we bring in you, which we would do during case consultation, for example, I'm what occurs to me is the metaphor of flight for you. And I always invite folks to journal with the objects. And so for you to set up a journal or write a letter to the
Mm.
dragon, and also you could become the scribe. And another exercise that clients can do is to not only write a letter of appreciation for whoever showed up, or a confrontation, or allow the figures, the tree, which is a wave, or the dragon, to be the scribe for them, and let them write a letter, a note, a poem to you or to each other. And the other exercise we often use is to put them both on a sheet of paper and then unpack it. Who would speak first? And then let them dragon tree wave, dragon tree, let them respond like a television script all the way down, and see what existential, so much of what you're saying is the existential life world, the experience, the very ground of being, the lived experience between birth and death, and all of your work about trauma and the threat to being alive, and the creativity you bring to that from a hermeneutic point of view, the psychological hermeneutics. I really hear and want to just honor the full circleness that you present, that you are, that strength of the rootedness, along with the power of flow and wave, as you describe that with your family, community, with your clients, with your colleagues, and and who you are in that wholeness that you bring. You're not one compartmentalized hat therapist doing this work, but the fluidity and the flight that you're able to take, that can lift your clients. I mean, there's so many metaphors, so much in just those two figures. How is this experience? What's coming up for you right now?
Oh, it's just I don't know, a deep sense of calm right now. Um, I this was a great exercise. Sometimes you kind of like, I thought about what symbols I was going to bring. I thought about why I was going to bring these two, but sometimes it takes like you expressing it out loud or you writing it down to really fully kind of absorb what that means. And I don't, you kind of, it's almost like having those spiritual moments where you're sort of confronted with some universal truth or something larger than yourself.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you get to have those in these exercises.
beautiful. We have some time, if you wish, to do other explorations, one of the questions that I like to bring forward is the developmental parts of the self, like your childhood, and envisioning yourself at a particular time under 10 years old, at a particular time in adolescence, and then back in time when you were just a young adult. But also I like pulling that out to a future self. So let's start with if you were to listen in to a voice from either a part of you that's way in the future, 80s, 90s, looking back at who you are now, what you've contributed for a very long time with severe trauma, and then who you've become. That voice, what would she say to you? What would she most appreciate? Or what does she want you to do with the rest of your life? Where does this go from here? Now that's one set of questions. The other place to go is, what about you before 10? And who is she in your sessions? What wisdom? We have amazing wisdoms, right? From childhood, 3, 7, 9, and adolescence. What amazing time, adolescence, and the growth between 13 and 17. But so those are just 3 nests. If you were to pick one of those, who would you pick?
Wow. So the little one I know quite well because
Oh,
I've done a lot of work with her.
okay, yes.
And there probably was a time that she was coming up in sessions, not because she wanted to play, but because she was feeling a lot of things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but she and I
Oh,
are good. We're good friends now.
so glad. So glad. And she's does she know how accomplished you are?
Um, hmm, I'd have to ask her. I don't, I don't know that I think she maybe has an inclination, but she really just doesn't care, which is probably a good thing.
Okay. And the other thing that you can do, because you have a good relationship with her, is the gestalt of inviting her to sit on your chair in the
Yeah.
in the office there. And you sit in your therapist seat for a few moments and take a look at her and take really a good look at how she wore her hair and what she has on her feet, what little clothes she has on, what the style at the time. And ask her if she could ask you any question, what it would be and how you would respond. And then switch chairs, sit in the client's chair and lift her up into the therapist's chair and ask her to be, just for a moment, to pretend that she could be your healer, your healing therapist. And
Oh, it's
what she
happening
would
as you're talking, Dr. D. That's
is
wonderful.
it is a powerful exploration.
Hmm.
And you could do these kind of gestalts that go to existential questions that free up more of what you want to do and explore with your clients.
Hmm.
It's playful. I like the wisdom one sometimes because from the elder, because it can be so validating. And if it isn't, then we haven't channeled into the critical, the committee in the head that may
Hmm.
still be lingering. It's like, ho, go to the beach, or go for a cruise, because um, we want to nourish and support with loving kindness the humanity, the humility that you've brought to underscore in our session. We're going to do another session, which will be an example of case consultation exploration. But for this particular session, I'm going to pause with my questions and ask you, what is it when you were preparing for this?
Mhm.
What did you most want to communicate to all of us?
Um, Thank you. I was actually just looking at my notes because I wanted to make sure that there were things that I mentioned. So let me see. Well, so I don't know if the intended audience for these trainings or these videos, if they're going to get to do the narrative and therapy training with you or not. But
That'll be up to them. Yeah.
I like one of the things that I written down was the protection, permission, and empowerment. And I think those are like, you should honestly have some merch with like the t-shirts that just have that on. So if you're wearing
What a
it, you
great
won't
idea.
remember it.
Great.
But that's been such and not that you don't hear those things in other types of settings, in other modalities, in other trainings, in other
Yes.
classes. It's just the way that they came together when working with symbols and working in sand, that just, uh, I don't know, just you integrate that information in a different way. So that was very, very important to me. I did want to share. So one of the things that you asked me in the email is talking about like some discoveries that maybe were unexpected,
Yes.
the joys that I've had and disappointments.
Uh-huh.
And so the discovery for me really was that even people who you would ordinarily wonder, like, is this is kind of expressive type of therapy, and in particular, working with sand and the symbols, is this going to be something they would be able to embrace? Like people that are very concrete thinkers, or maybe they have some kind of developmental issue, um, that they're not readily able to like identify their emotions, like the clients like that, where before I had done this training, I would wonder, like maybe this is not, I'm something that they can embrace fully. And I've just discovered that um there really isn't. I mean, it may change a little bit how you do what you do, but even people that like just talking about things like that could be challenging for them when you give them the figures, or when you invite them to
Mhm.
engage with building something, that
Mm.
they're able to do it, even if it may not feel. I think sometimes when you start working in that way and you have a client that builds this marvelous tray and you just see all these different metaphors, and it just feels like you're in, expressive therapy heaven. And then you have someone who puts like 4 figures in the tray, and it's just so hard for them. They're working on it so hard and it just feels so sparse. But the process is the same. They're just, the output is different, but what they're going through is the same, and it's just as powerful. So I just wanted to say
Mm.
that because I think that was one of my discoveries, that don't cut off of something that could be a resource from someone because you feel that they may not be able to use it. Like,
Mhm.
offer it as an option when you are able to.
And be open to the limits that
Mhm.
anything is okay. It's all powerful representation where the client lives in the moment.
Exactly, exactly. And so I think sometimes we make those judgments like, oh, maybe that client, this may not be something that they would enjoy. I think if that's a tool that you enjoy, you should at least offer it,
Yeah,
And if they tell you like,
love it.
no, then that's a different story.
Yeah.
I think the joys really is seeing the clients engage with the symbols, and kind of what I was saying before,
Mm.
just describing a symbol in a way, and then you can, they're talking about themselves, but they're also talking about the lighthouse or whatever it is that's in front of them. And then you can kind of see that
Mm.
transformation where their shoulders kind of come up and they sit up a little bit and their eyes open, and they don't know why it's happening, but you do, and it's just precious.
It is
So,
precious, profound.
Yeah, and it's just, and I had a client like that that has like a very, very active inner critic, that part that, nothing that ordinarily what he says and how he refers to himself, it's almost painful to hear because it's just so
Wounding.
and then he was in the tray and he just picked a symbol and was just using such self-affirming language that I felt like my head was exploding. Like it was just so beautiful.
Well,
So yeah, that's definitely the joy. And I think the disappointments, I wanted to say, sometimes things don't go the way that you think they should, but that doesn't mean that they failed. So
right, right.
so
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's mostly what gets failed is our expectations. So whatever
Mhm.
happens, and in any intervention that you do,
Mm,
you always have an opportunity to work with the outcome. There's
mhm.
always a way to kind of explore what happened. There's always a way to explore the impact that it had on that person, the impact that it had on the relationship that person has with you. So I feel like any intervention, whether it lives up to the expectations that you have or not, is an opportunity to deepen the work that you're doing. And then, of course, the caveat there is that maybe you should examine what kinds of expectations you're
Exactly.
coming to the session
Yes,
with. Um,
yes.
and more work on those rather than, what happens with the client.
Let me footnote that underscore. It's so important for us to hear how or if an expectation exists, then the follow-up criticism of self, criticism of a particular approach or theory or training or whatever, rather than just a kindness that says, I wondered what I expected, and pulling back from that to release self-criticism that's unwarranted, but using critical thinking in that more scientific attitude, like, what did I expect from this exploration?
Mm.
And what do I need to tweak? What do I need to learn? What do I need to pull back on? Those are I think much kinder than the default, which is the critical committee that um, rushes to judge the therapist or the theory or the approach and yada yada, all that other.
Yeah. And I think sometimes the thing that I see that I don't know why it happens as often as I see it happen, but when you do discover that there may be parts of you that struggle with the process in one way or another, um, please do your work. Like you go find a therapist, you do what you need
Yep.
to do, because those things don't go away on their own, just like you wouldn't expect your clients to heal on their own without
Right.
the work that you're asking them to do.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so important, um, just like in dentistry or veterinary or all the other fields, we have to find a good match. That
Mm,
it isn't always, like, I found over decades that it was important for me to shift from one approach, one therapist to another,
mm,
to learn um, the vision that they could get to parts of myself that I had blinders on, that I could not see, but also wasn't ready at maybe 25 as opposed to any other decade. So
mm,
I think we're always growing
mhm.
personally, or should be, and that we all have a lot, we all have so much work, and how beautiful, how like an artist, we develop our practice. That therapists are essentially artists, um, like an architect or like a paleontologist. We are cultural anthropologists because the client is always the cultural other. And so
Mm,
how they are different can be a beautiful mirror to how to reflect on ourselves,
mhm.
and to open that. Anyway, I can get so excited about the teaching part because that's my life work, is the teaching part. How are you right now, and what is it that you would like to say or do to bring closure to our interview? How are you right now?
I am feeling really calm and peaceful, and there's like some joy in my heart. I think it was nice to be able to share the space with you and talk to you. It's always a pleasure to do that, and connect to some of the meanings within. That was very nice too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so important because it can anchor what you're doing. So, and we don't often do it for ourselves. So it's nice to have these opportunities
Yeah.
to kind of allow ourselves to see what it is that we do and how we do it.
And you're such a gift. Everything that you've said today has been such a gift for our viewers, no matter what stage in their clinical career that they are, and or of course for non-therapists that happen to view this on YouTube, it's the person of the therapist, how you underscored right away humility and respect, but also the threads, vulnerability, receptivity, leaning into creativity, and the what we might use as very soulful, authentic, searching, that openness that you bring. It's the desire from that very little girl, and from the search in the Republic, Czech Republic, family, uh, all the transitions, the wounds and the pains that you've seen, not only with the children that you were first initially dealing with, but the domestic violence, clients, the woundedness, all of that witnessing, all that incredible presence and healing. I truly believe that the person of the therapist, that you, Hana, did that work for yourself, did that work for your clients, and that rippled out inevitably. It ripples out to maybe what might be our collective goal, which is healing, which is our small part of finding peace and integrity and authenticity in the world, to walk the walk, to talk the talk, to be who we are. And I feel very strongly that you do that with your clients, and you have done that with me, with us together today. And I'm grateful. Looking forward to doing a case consultation with you for part of this series. We have two series. One is the person of the therapist, which is this interview. And then the other series that I'm developing is more case consultation, more instructional, even though we glanced at a couple of the delightful, deeply meaningful exercises that we can do with symbols during our interview. There's so much more. Hana, thank you so much for being who you are and for being who you are with us today.
My pleasure.
And thank you all for spending time with us, because, without you, then the richness of our private conversation doesn't get out in the world. So go ahead and share this link with your colleagues or friends, and join us again for another interview. In the meantime, please take very good, gentle care. Stay well. Take good care. And goodbye.